The WWE returns could be set to continue as a former Universal Champion and a former NXT North American Champion are reported to be discussed in possible returns to the company. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of world wrestling entertainment. And the returns, they appear to be continuing. We've seen so many former WWE stars return to the company now that Triple H is in charge of not only talent relations, but also creative. He's the one signing the contracts, and he's also the one writing the television. Arguably, maybe below Nick Khan and Stephanie McMahon, he's the most powerful man in WWE right now with the departure of Vince McMahon. And we have seen several names that he worked with in NXT or worked with in the past return to the company in the past few weeks. Names like Dakota Kai, Dexter Lumis, Karrion Kross, Johnny Gargano, Hit Row, just to name a few. But the returns appear to be continuing this week. The names that have been discussed include former Universal Champion Braun Strowman and former NXT North American Champion Bronson Reed. Now, it must be said, these are just names that have been discussed, but the reason why this is significant is, one, the people reporting it, and two, the timing of it. The last few weeks, when we have heard about names being discussed to return to WWE, it's always happened to be on the night or the day of a show, Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown. And when these reports have come out, let's break them down. For instance, Karrion Kross. The report comes out. Sean Ross Sapp, Fightful Select, says Karrion Kross has been discussed to return to the company. He then appears on SmackDown that very night. Same with Dexter Lumis. Dexter Lumis has been reported to be returning to the company. He returns that very night. Hit Row have been discussed that they could be returning to WWE. That night on SmackDown, they returned to the company. Now, I don't think there were any when it comes to Johnny Gargano last week. That was a pretty well-kept secret. But the point being is that the timing of this report is incredibly significant. These two names being discussed implies we could see a return tonight. Now, will it happen, won't it happen? I don't know. Certainly, Braun Strowman is a name that I think is a real possibility for tonight. Bronson Reed might be a little bit more complicated. But let's get into this report from Sean Ross Sapp via Fightful Select. Of course, that's their Patreon service. Be sure to check that out and subscribe. Very much worth the money, so be sure to check those out. But another major name has at least been discussed by WWE about a potential return to the company. Fightful Select is reporting that among names pitched or discussed for a return to WWE, bear in mind a lot of names have been pitched, but a name does include Braun Strowman. Now, of course, Braun Strowman was released by WWE just over a year ago. It was on June 2nd, 2021, just about 9 months after holding the WWE Universal Championship that he won at that year's, or the previous year's rather, WrestleMania, that being WrestleMania 36, the empty arena WrestleMania, the pandemic WrestleMania, where he defeated WWE Hall of Famer Bill Goldberg on, was it night 2 of WrestleMania? I forget. Nevertheless, he was a former Universal Champion, and just 9 months later, he was gone from the company. Now, Strowman had actually re-signed with WWE in 2019, and this is where his sort of departure from WWE gets quite complex, because what did we hear all of last year? Budget cuts, pal. WWE's trimming the fat when it comes to their talent budget. And reportedly, Braun Strowman had one of actually the larger contracts on the WWE roster, and it was because he was a good businessman, and he had signed an extension with WWE at just the right time. Strowman had re-signed with WWE in 2019, landing a major 7-figure multi-year deal that has paled in comparison to some of the newer contracts that WWE has handed out over the last year. Now, why did it come to this? Why was the price so high at the time? Well, the reason the price was so high at the time is this was coming off the back of this huge injection of cash into WWE. They had just signed at the end of 2018 all of these television right deals with Fox, with NBC Universal, plus they had got this big Saudi relationship, and it was absolutely all guns blazing when it comes to WWE about finances. They were more financially viable than they'd ever been. There was more cash in the company than there had ever been. This was prior to the pandemic as well. AEW was a thing at that period of time. They weren't on TNT at that point, but they were a company and they were a startup and they were financially well back. They still are. And the point was that WWE thought, we've got all this money. We're signing everyone to massive contracts, lucrative contracts. So one, because we can do it. Two, we're making sure that the other company doesn't sign up anyone, even though it's a Braun Strowman. And frankly, the idea of Braun Strowman going to AEW is kind of laughable. But the point, Braun Strowman in 2019 was a big deal. Braun Strowman in 2018 was a big deal. Braun Strowman in 2017 was a big deal. Now, when it came to his contract renegotiations with WWE, he actually got down to the last few months of his deal, and sources in WWE said that he played, quote, hardball during his negotiations with the company. Now, in the year or so since leaving the company, numerous talent have noted to Fightful that his comments on independent wrestlers had actually rubbed them the wrong way. Though at this point, they weren't sure if it was meant or if he was just doing it to garner heat. Of course, that was at the time during the pandemic where he spoke about, you know, when I had no money and this, that, and the other, and talking about merchandise stores and all that kind of stuff, and indie wrestlers, and, you know, he just... Braun Strowman, first of all, when you see some of his posts, you sort of realize kind of what the guy he is. But I think also at the time, and we've seen a lot of people do this in the past, when they're in that WWE bubble, when they have that WWE brainworm, they will say things that are just dumb and are completely out of touch of reality. Because unfortunately, when you're in that WWE bubble and you hear the company line all the time and you're constantly working, constantly making towns, you do get really out of touch with reality at points. And I do give him a pinch of salt with that, but then also some of the things he said since leaving WWE, I think he's just a bit of an odd guy, to be honest. Now, other sources within WWE have actually complimented Strowman on looking ring-ready physically, saying he looks better now than when he was in WWE. Which, to be honest, when I read that, I went, well, of course he does. Of course Braun Strowman looks better physically now than when he was in WWE. He's got more time on his hand. He's not making towns 5 nights a week. He's not traveling from state to state and around the world, wrestling matches, working hurt. You know, he's not doing that. His schedule is considerably lighter. He's doing control your narrative, whatever the hell that is. But he's doing that, so he should be in better shape. And he is in better shape. He can spend more time doing workouts and most importantly, having his nutrition right, because that's the hardest thing to do on the road when you're traveling all the time. So I don't see that as this huge, oh, wow. You know, Braun Strowman, yeah, he's in great shape now. He was in good shape when he was in WWE. He physically transformed himself while he was on the road. Look at Braun Strowman when he first got called up to the main roster, and when he was just leaving WWE, he looked fantastic, and he still does. He looks better now, but also he should. Now, since his release, Strowman has only worked 8 matches, with half of them being on Control Your Narrative shows. Now, Fightful hasn't learned if or how far negotiations have been between Strowman and WWE, or what the specific pitches were involving him returning to the company. Now, people of influence in WWE would not confirm when asked by Fightful, but they also didn't deny that he would be returning, essentially being met with a wall of silence regarding the topic of Strowman. Now, to reiterate, Fightful can't confirm that Strowman is indeed headed back to WWE. Only what they can confirm is that pitches have been made and he has been discussed internally for a return. In addition, they've also confirmed Andrew Zarian of the MacMen podcast report that there is interest on WWE's side in bringing back Bronson Reed. Of course, Reed was heavily pushed during the end of Triple H's NXT Black and Gold era. He had several looks, of course, on the main roster, didn't he? Before getting released. By all accounts, Vince McMahon just wasn't a fan. They haven't learned of anything beyond general interest that has been put forth. I see Bronson Reed as a more difficult one. I don't know if he signed a contract with New Japan Pro Wrestling. I know he's doing dates with them. I know he's doing spots for them. I know he hopes to travel to Japan. He might have already traveled to Japan. I'm not totally up on my New Japan. But he worked a load of Impact dates. He had a short contract with Impact Wrestling. And essentially, he did that contract with Impact to give him something to do whilst he was waiting for things to open up more with New Japan and travel internationally. Now, of course, that could all change if Triple H does come calling, because he does have a very good relationship with Triple H. But it all does depend on whether or not he has signed a contract with New Japan, if he has a deal in place with New Japan, or maybe he might just think, actually, you know what? I'm just going to stick in, because New Japan have been booking him very, very strong. But again, I don't know, honestly, if he signed a contract. If he hasn't, then we could see Bronson Reed back with the company. If not, if he has rather signed the contract, then I wouldn't expect that one to happen. The Braun Strowman one, where else is he going to go? He's not going to AEW. Impact really, 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 really wanted Braun Strowman. In fact, there were really strong rumors that around October time last year that Strowman was going to make his debut at Bound for Glory and all this kind of stuff, and they really pursued him. But it had been reported at the time, and I don't suspect it's changed too much since then. Strowman's asking price was really high. And whenever people get released from WWE and they have a high asking price, people kind of try and look down on them or turn their nose up at them and go, oh, Braun Strowman's got a high asking price. Well, he was on a multi-million dollar contract. Of course his asking price is high. Like, why wouldn't it be high? He was getting paid a certain amount in WWE, and he feels that's what he's worth. So, of course, his asking price was high. Now, obviously, he's been part of this Control Your Narrative promotion, which is somewhat, well, it is pretty ludicrous. I just saw they invaded the NWA show over the weekend, whatever that means. But, you know, WWE clearly is the best place for Braun Strowman. And whether you like Braun Strowman or not, there is no doubt he's an attraction. I think that, you know, his body of work was actually quite good in WWE. Like with anything under the Vince McMahon era and regime in WWE, he was red hot in 2016, late 2016, certainly 2017, certainly 2018. Every single time they should have and could have pulled the trigger on this guy, they didn't do it. What did they have him do? They had him lose. They had him lose to Brock Lesnar about 10 million times. And when it came the time for him to actually win the Universal Championship, which wasn't the plan, by the way, Roman Reigns was meant to beat Goldberg, of course, at WrestleMania 36, but the pandemic happened and Roman Reigns had to go home because he was immunocompromised. When that happened, they had to get someone to fill in. So they got Braun Strowman to come in. But at that point, he was cold as anything. It's not as if he was doing anything prior to that anyway. He just lost the Intercontinental Championship, which was a really underwhelming title run for him as well. He lost it to Sami Zayn when they had that Cesaro, Shinsuke Nakamura and Sami Zayn faction going on. Every single time that Braun Strowman felt like he was over, he was red hot, they had him lose. And it got to the point when they went, I wonder why this guy isn't that over. The fact he stayed over for such a long period of time was actually remarkable, considering the bad booking that they had this guy involved in. And the reason this guy got over is because initially the booking of Braun Strowman was really good. It was, how do you book a big monster? You have him beat everyone and you have him do just unbelievably insane stuff. These stunts they had him doing, whether it was tipping over ambulances or throwing chairs at Roman Reigns or grappling hooks or dumpsters or whatever it was, it got him over. And people liked it because Braun Strowman came out, his music was good, and again, none of the choo-choo train stuff. This is the problem with Braun Strowman as well. Again, whenever they had it good, they always had to change it. This time it's the Strowman Express. Remember that? He's the Strowman Express. Choo-choo Braun Strowman. Oh my goodness. It was just dumb. All of it was just dumb. And it got to the point where his last WrestleMania match, he was wrestling the boss's son, Shane McMahon. And that storyline was dumb. And the storyline was, Braun Strowman's dumb. It was just, and that's the thing with Braun Strowman, isn't it? It's just constant bad booking. And I really did feel for the guy at times. And again, didn't cover himself in glory. His Universal Championship reign was a joke. But again, that kind of isn't his fault, considering it happened in the pandemic where no one really cared. Like, there was so much else going on in the world, and pro wrestling was just difficult at the time. There was nobody in arenas. WWE took months to figure out how they were even going to book their shows or even present their shows, actually, let alone book it, present their shows. It was in the Performance Center for most of his title reign, and it just wasn't good. It just wasn't good, but the shows weren't good at the time. There was no reaction to it. And again, it's not as if he was over coming into that title reign. It was a rushed job. He wasn't over. He had been over for years prior. And the reason he wasn't over at that point is because WWE had criminally mismanaged him and badly booked a monster that fell into their lap and could do incredible things for his size. Make no mistake as well. When Braun Strowman got called up to the main roster in 2015, he couldn't work. I think he had worked like 3 or 4 matches. Not in terms of like, oh, what, for WWE? No, in his whole career, the guy hadn't worked at all. And the fact he got as good as he is, or as good as he got, is remarkable. It is remarkable. And again, WWE just criminally mismanaged that, or Vince McMahon did. Now, is it too late for him? If he comes back now, is he going to be the Braun Strowman of 2016, 2017, 2018? No, I don't think so, unless they somehow find a way to make it work. I don't know how they do that, but Triple H may have a vision for this guy. So maybe it might be a good thing for him. Is he going to be on the same contract he was when he left WWE? I highly, highly doubt it. In fact, this was kind of a feeling that some people had about Strowman, really. You know, when he left, a lot of people said, no, he'll be back. a lot of people thought it was just a big grand scheme, essentially, to get Strowman off this giant contract, and then in 18 months or a year's time, they'll hire him back on a lesser contract. And that's exactly what they're going to do if these reports are accurate. Again, that's slightly different circumstances, Vince McMahon, all that kind of stuff, but I don't see Braun Strowman coming back on this ginormous multi-million-dollar contract that he was on, because, quite frankly, not a lot of people are getting that right now in WWE. Things have changed. So, will Strowman appear on Raw tonight? I don't know. I think it's highly likely, honestly. Again, if you look at the track record, you can't ignore the pattern here. And the pattern is that when these reports come out, they tend to appear on the broadcast. So, keep an eye out for Braun Strowman tonight on Monday Night Raw. But let me know your thoughts on a possible return for Braun Strowman and Bronson Reed in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.